Hello and welcome back to more content from IEEC 2021. I hope you're all well rested, had a chance to grab a tea and coffee and also have a quick chat with your peers in our virtual networking area. So we're going to move on this morning and hear from more of our wonderful presenters. We have now Paula Whitehouse and, excuse me, I've forgotten your name. Sorry, Sophie-Louise Hyde. Sorry, Sophie. Dr. Sophie-Louise Hyde from Loughborough University, Paula Whitehouse from Aston University. They're going to tell us how to achieve the outstanding entrepreneurial university. So over to you, Paula and Sophie.
Thank you very much, Emily. When we were thinking about this session, Sophie and I were chatting about it, and we realised that a lot of people in the network have engaged with the Times Higher THE Outstanding Entrepreneurial Award in different ways, perhaps submitting applications or being shortlisted, but we don't tend to talk about it with each other. So it was really nice when Sophie and I got chatting about it to share experiences, really. And we thought that this would make a great session for the delegates of this conference. So the way we're going to run this session is I will give a little bit of introduction. I'll hand over to Sophie when I've finished my introduction, and she will talk about the Loughborough experience. I'll then talk a little bit about our Aston experience of this, and I'm hoping by then your queries and comments will be appearing in the chat and the Q&A, and we'll be able to end the session by getting some opinions really from you as an audience as well. So when we were talking about the Entrepreneurial University, I think we've got some slides that can go up that will start illustrating what I'm talking about. I put together a bit of information about what Aston did, and Sophie said, oh, I've seen some key, themes here that are shared. And so I'm going to start by just talking a little bit about that, which is really, what is an entrepreneurial university? It's not very clearly defined, but it's something which I think we probably all have in our heads for our own institutions. And so moving on, we've got a list really of things that we did identify, and it's to do with the culture and the opportunities. So any kind of university that claims to be entrepreneurial probably displays these characteristics. It's an environment where our students are graduating role models of entrepreneurship, and it's generally the kind of environment where people are innovating and are able to be supported in starting businesses. But it's a lot more than that as well. So what we will do is spend a few minutes talking about the experiences of two universities. And at this point, I'll hand over to Sophie, who has a set of slides and will describe the Loughborough experience.
Thank you, Paula, and welcome everyone, and thanks for having me. If we could move to the next slide, please, that'd be great. So Loughborough University won the Outstanding Entrepreneurial University of the Year in 2019. And for the next kind of 10 minutes or so, I'm going to focus on some of the key areas that were recognised as part of our submission and the judges' comments, really kind of Loughborough's success, and in particular, why Loughborough stood out. And really what's really lovely about this presentation and co-presenting with Paula is that we're coming at this from slightly different remits and perspectives. So I'm focusing quite a lot on my remit as Student Enterprise Coordinator at the University of Loughborough at the moment. So if we could have next slide, please. So I'm going to start with kind of why Loughborough stands out, and really there were some key areas that I think the judges really picked up on in 2019 with our submission. One of those was really having a truly holistic approach, and I think lots of outstanding entrepreneurial universities and entrepreneurial universities generally will have that kind of truly holistic or strategic approach to enterprise and entrepreneurship education. And the judges' comments really focused explicitly on a few key areas that you'll see here on the slide. One of those was our representation for enterprise across every academic school. And this wasn't just in terms of academic representation from staff, in terms of associate deans for enterprise in every school, but also with our own student representatives for both enterprise and employability across every school. It recognised for the significance of enterprise in all staff contracts, which many of you will be familiar with in terms of everyday duties, academic responsibilities, research impact, for example, but also innovation in teaching. And a particular highlight was the university's year-long placements, including our year in enterprise placement year with the DPS. And during the year of submission in 2019, we had 1,500 plus students going into year-long placements with over 1,000 organisations. So really great that was recognised in the submission. And finally, the judges really commended Loughborough on the engagement we have with regional enterprise. And a key part of that has been the development of our University Science and Enterprise Park. And again, I'm going to touch upon that shortly at the end of my Loughborough examples regarding further developments in this area since our submission. Next slide, please. So just to touch upon Loughborough's strategy briefly and to highlight this, we are actually currently in the middle of developing a new strategy, but most recently our focus has been on building excellence as part of our strategy in the 4 key areas that you can see on screen. So investing in our staff, educating our students for success, growing our capacity and influence as an institution, and raising standards and aspirations. So not only our standards and aspirations as an institution, but also those of our prospective and current students and also our graduates. And really key to this is obviously embedding research and teaching and enterprise and sport for Loughborough in particular across all 4 of these areas. So next slide, please. And I think what I just wanted to highlight here is that a holistic entrepreneurial ecosystem for us, what this means in practice is one in which the activities that support our student and graduate enterprise activities and support our students and graduates in entrepreneurship, where they are considered just as important as our approaches to commercialising research, for example, to our connections with our alumni, and one where partnering with external organisations to deliver far-reaching impact happens across all 3 of those areas of that kind of holistic entrepreneurial ecosystem. For us, that's been really key. And that was something, as I said earlier, that really made Loughborough stand out in our submission for the award back in 2019. If we can move the slide on, please. And I think one of the examples that's really important to me when I consider my remit in student enterprise is the fact that this entrepreneurial ecosystem has really extended to our students and graduates, and that this was picked up in our submission and in our award win in 2019. And that one of the things that our extended ecosystem does is support the students and graduates focusing on celebrating and encouraging community collaboration and creativity through the Loughborough Enterprise Network, as well as entrepreneurship and innovation in everything it does. And in particular, this extended ecosystem for our students and graduates actually takes the form of multiple access points, multiple opportunities for our students and graduates across physical spaces on campus and off campus to access support when it comes to entrepreneurial skills, entrepreneurial mindsets, and also thinking about actually going and setting up your own enterprise or your own business. And you can see some of those physical spaces actually presented here on the slide in front of you. But it's also about providing them that headspace. And you'll also see on the slide in front of you a map that really demonstrates this ecosystem and the journey that a student can take through that. The headspace and the physical space that's required for our students and graduates to really give time, focus, and really compartmentalise their enterprise and entrepreneurship innovation activities where they'd prefer to do this. So beyond the library for study or the bedroom for their own time, for example. And real financial support is offered to our students and graduates through the Enterprise Network. We've got a series of funding pots, a funding pot called Initiate, which is up to £500 for their ideas, and a further pot of up to £5,000 called the Startup Fund, which is a grant that many of our students and our graduates post-graduation for a period of time have access to apply for. And I think the key for me when it comes to this ecosystem is that it's extended to our students and graduates as an enterprise family. And we often use the term Loughborough family here at the institution. And we've really taken that to the next level in terms of this entrepreneurial ecosystem. Sometimes, of course, we're also their critical friend, telling them what they might not always like to hear when it comes to their ideas and their businesses. But it's really great that we've seen that ecosystem spread through into the support that we give our students and graduates, and that we do place that with as much importance as we do our other enterprise activities. If I could move to the next slide, please. I think what's really, really crucial and what's been really interesting about our experience, and something that was picked up in our submission and our award in 2019, was the unique partnership we have with our Students' Union as part of this enterprise activity. We work really closely with the Students' Union to partner with them to ensure that they are the first access point in the work that we do along our student journey or our student ecosystem for student and graduate enterprise support. They will inspire the students and graduates to identify as being already enterprising, to get involved at early idea stage and to explore their options when it comes to entrepreneurship and innovation. And this is really important for us because they've really focused on the mass engagement piece with our students before really kind of funneling them through, so to speak, to where they can go, that pipeline, that journey of support and onto the next stage of that in their pathway. That might be placement year in enterprise, it might be enterprise embedded in academia, or it might be the extracurricular support to start a business or to retain them as graduate talent in the East Midlands as a graduate through our Science and Enterprise Park. Now, the partnership can obviously, any partnership can be challenging, different agendas, different perspectives. We're not line managed by the same people. There are budget and funding allocations to balance and to manage. And there are different responsibilities for both organisations because we are separate organisations, although we work together really well in this partnership. And so I think what's been really crucial for us is managing to maintain that strong relationship, negotiate, communicate with the Students' Union to allow our pipeline to work really seamlessly. And they're not the only colleagues across campus that we work with in that way. We have connections to our in-curricular lead, so our in-curricular lead Amanda Berry in the business school, to our incubator and our incubator manager and our colleagues in research and enterprise at the end of our student and graduate journey and ecosystem, and also to our Loughborough London campus, which is where I'm going to go next. So if we could move the slide on, please. One of the things that really helped us to stand out, as well as part of the submission for the Outstanding Entrepreneurial University Award, was actually the fact that we have embedded enterprise and innovation in our Loughborough London postgraduate campus. So this opened in 2015, and innovation is at the heart of everything that this campus does. It's based down on the Here East Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park in London, so it's right at the centre of the East London ecosystem and really makes use of all its connections and the network around there as part of what it does. We've got MSCs that run at the campus focused on entrepreneurship and innovation. And what's great about those is that actually students can combine those with a number of other subjects, so sport, media, digital, design, and students and graduates are encouraged to engage with elements of enterprise innovation or entrepreneurship throughout, both in and out of the curriculum, as part of what the offer in London entails. We have an extended Loughborough Enterprise Network resource and offer down there too, which is fantastic. And they run a number of programmes and collaborative projects that mean they're working extensively with SMEs and external partner organisations as part of their base down on Olympic Park. They're really well established and at the centre of the East London entrepreneurial ecosystem, and they do really make the most of that when it comes to really flying the flag at annual events such as the Venture Crawl, which they do in partnership with a number of other universities, both in London, the UK and globally. And I'm sure that many of you have heard presentations on Venture Crawl here at the conference in the past. Finally, one of the things that the London campus does, which I think really highlights the fact that innovation in enterprise is at the heart of everything they do, is they do hold a Dean's Award for Enterprise Scholarship as well. This scholarship celebrates a student that is arriving to study at the university, helping them to transition into that study at the university, that already comes with enterprise on the agenda, that perhaps already has an idea that they want to explore, or is just already enterprising in something that they're doing pre-studying at the university. So that's a really special addition to the offer there too. So since the award success, and just finally from me in terms of Loughborough's win, it's really important to utilise and think about how you can use the win as an institution. And I know that Paula's going to touch upon this shortly too in her half of the presentation. But Loughborough's really kind of developed further in terms of its celebration and championing of all things enterprise and innovation. And we've done that across all areas of our ecosystem. And so I just want to end by touching on a few examples and focusing on some of those to just share those with you. So if we could just move to the next slide, please. So when we're thinking about the kind of wider ecosystem, our LUCEP now hosts over 90 organisations across 3 or 4 different buildings on the Science and Enterprise Park. So we have our Sport Park, our Advanced Technology Innovation Centre, and also more recently, the biggest HQ for the Access Group, which you can see a picture of on the slide in front of you. We've also further established our University Incubator, LU Inc. So this is early stage innovation community for graduate startups, so we can retain retain the talent here in the East Midlands, academic spin-outs and local entrepreneurs. I'm really pleased to say as well that every company that we've worked with in that early stage innovation community, including some of our students and graduates that has sought to seek investment during COVID, has been successful. And as part of some of our funding that we've awarded, I've worked out recently that since our Startup Fund grant process was launched in 2017, we've awarded over £116,000 to over 61 students and graduates that are kickstarting ideas or starting businesses. So that's a really great figure on the screen for you. And then finally, just to touch upon one of the more recent successes that we've developed in Careers and Enterprise Education, which is our Careers and Enterprise Hub. So this is a partnership with Loughborough College in the Loughborough Town Centre, and it's one of the first UK projects that's been completed from the government's town centre deal, so offering advice, guidance and support for skill development and aiming to boost, you know, the local and regional economy post-COVID. So lots of really great reasons there as to why we have and how we developed that holistic entrepreneurial ecosystem and continue to develop it since the win. And I'm going to hand back over to Paula now to touch upon some of the experiences that Aston have had since theirs too. So over to you, Paula.
Thank you very much, Sophie. It's brilliant to hear about all of that. And even though we found some sort of common ground in terms of what we focus on, it does look different for the two universities. And I'm just going to spend a little bit of time now talking about what we've done at Aston. So Aston University is the current holder of the Outstanding Entrepreneurial University. And I'm a bit sad that you're not all on campus with us, because you would have seen this massive banner we've got on the outside of the business school. But I'll have to show you a picture of it instead. And we were lucky enough to have the Chancellor visit us at the beginning of August to not just to take this photo, but he came because we were doing our very first cohort of the government's Help to Grow programme. And I think that's just one illustration of how broad the entrepreneurial characteristics are, if you like. We're not just talking about helping students start businesses. We're talking about all sorts of things. And through Help to Grow with many other business schools in the UK, we'll actually reach 30,000 businesses over the next 3 years. So that's sort of an angle that you wouldn't always think about. What I have done is put together the next slide, which shows what the judges said about Aston's entry. So when you put together an entry for the THE Awards, what you're doing is kind of building a narrative, because we tend to have a great deal of activity. I'm not just talking about Aston, I'm talking about other institutions. There are lots of things going on, and a lot of it is quite grassroots activity as well when you talk about the enterprise space. And actually putting that into your 500 words is very difficult. You have to kind of find a pathway through so that people reading it can really understand where you're coming from with it. The judges felt that Aston did have a really strategic approach, and mentioned our inclusive approach as well, which really links back to our session this morning with Monda Ram and the work that he's doing. So with CREM, not only that, but our widening participation with our students. So there's a great deal there that means that we can be inclusive, but it's not just that we do that within the university walls. We are trying to influence other business support providers within our region as well to be more inclusive. So there are other things there, the fact it's embedded in the culture, the fact that our leadership really take this seriously and are excited by our enterprise activities, and that actually shines through and is a really important thing as well, and our vision. We have a strategy at the moment which is beneficiary-led, and for each of our beneficiary groups, there are three groups, enterprise and entrepreneurship is actually there at the heart of the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. Just got on this slide here some examples there of that. And I think the fact that it really sort of shows at that very top level was quite important for the judges. And we were able to demonstrate that and not only talk about it, but we were able to sort of put quotes in the application that showed this. So that's a very important element of it. But it's not just the Aston strategy, that follows through into other documents. So on the next slide, you can see our Civic University agreement, That was something that was done in the last 12 months through our college and colleagues in Research and Knowledge Exchange. And you can see the themes that we're working on that we feel that we can contribute to in terms of priorities for the region. And you can absolutely see the entrepreneurship running through that, and the support for businesses, which is the core of what Aston does, and has been doing since it was established, first of all as a technical college in 1896, and then later on as a university that's actually been for employers and set up by employers. And that's always been core to what we do. We also, in recent times, have been working very hard on our knowledge exchange strategy. So that's where this links in now with the KEF and the Knowledge Exchange Concordat. And you can see the themes here and the categories of activity that we're concentrating on as a university. Again, employability, entrepreneurship, very, very strong there. And it's important to have that consistency through those things that we're all actually working on as a sector at the moment. And so we've got our three kinds of activity. There's where this matters to students and graduates through teaching, and not only things within the curriculum, but extracurricular opportunities. And you heard from 4 of the people who've been through our BC programme and started their businesses. That was a very good illustration of that in the previous session. Research is important here. We are lucky to have the Enterprise Research Centre as well as Monda's Centre, which is CREM, working really, really closely with the Centre for Growth, where we're doing engagement. We're engaging with hundreds of businesses every year. And so it all connects together in that way. With the third of these strands, which is that engagement, the connection to small businesses, helping people to grow, and that is how we can have an impact in the region. If we work with just a handful of businesses, we can really, really transform them. But if we work with hundreds of businesses, we can transform the region, and that's really what we aim to do. And my final slide on this is just to talk very quickly about one of our programs, which is the Aston Programme for Small Business Growth. And that's illustrative of what we were looking at in terms of entrepreneurship, what's needed. We had very well established startup support. There were growth programs like the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses program that we've been running for 10 years now. But there was a gap in the middle. So those early stage entrepreneurs, they'd started up, they weren't big enough to engage in the growth programs, needed support. And so we created this program. And in fact, NAS Media, who we heard from on the panel, and also Green Sisters, have both been through this program. So you can see there's a continuum of support there for the businesses. So I wanted to, just before I hand over to Sophie, just raise 3 questions. And these are, on the next slide, what came into my mind as I've been doing that strategic work to do with the Knowledge Exchange Concordat Action Plan and everything else. So what is it that an entrepreneurial university actually does? Is it to do with teaching entrepreneurship? Is it to do with nurturing entrepreneurship, or is it actually to do with how we behave as an institution? And I just think those are really, really interesting points to bring up at the point when I'm going to hand over to Sophie, who has been looking at the Q&A, hopefully, in case there's anything there that you have brought up.
Yeah, thank you, Paula. There are a couple of questions. Can I just check as well that the chat's been cleared, so we're only seeing stuff that is relevant to now, just to make sure, because there are a few that are directed at me, but I want to make sure we're checking everything. So we've had a few questions around main sources of funding, Paula, in terms of how our graduates and students might access that, or our staff might access that for commercialisation activities. I know from our side, I can talk a little bit about the fact that that tends to come from working with our alumni really closely in particular, and having some really great donations to the institutions that way, and also obviously key external partners. So universities here work closely with Santander universities, for example. We have a partnership with them that enables us to really actively work on some of our student and graduate entrepreneurship activities, and in particular our funding sources. We're also a part of Creative Spark, which I know you've heard about through the conference this year as well, and previously, and obviously so as part of our work with the Creative Spark programme and British Council, we support our student and graduates that way too. I don't know, Paula, if you want to just add a few words on that from your side and Aston's perspective.
Thank you, Sophie. I think it's incredibly important, and there is no way we could deliver the scale of activity we do without those really important external sources of finance. But they're problematic. We have built up a large amount of ERDF funded activity, which we're going to be losing that funding stream. And the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, it's not quite clear yet how that's going to work. So we are now sort of looking at how we can continue that activity in different ways. So the political cycles and funding cycles are something that we're always at the mercy of. But we also have corporate sponsors. I mentioned Goldman Sachs earlier, you mentioned Santander, universities. And so actually for us, it's the mix. You have to kind of de-risk it by having that mix of funding, because I don't think many institutions in the network are in the position of being able to do all of this activity from core funding. It's just not the way that the sector works.
Brilliant, thanks Paula. I'm just going to double check and see if we've got any more. We've had a question here about strategy, and I think actually that's really relevant, Paula, because you were talking earlier about the strategic vision, and we were talking about holistic approaches, and perhaps kind of thinking about new priorities for enterprise strategies. So I'll come to you first, Paula. Is there anything in terms of Aston's strategy and kind of new priorities for enterprise that you want to touch upon?
I think it's really interesting, and strategically for us, it's about building capacity, and that's in a number of ways. It's building our expertise and skills amongst staff in being able to engage in this way. It's building the ability to embed enterprise within the curriculum. And that it involves support, it involves training and other things, but there's a large part of it when you're thinking strategy, which is culture change quite often, where you've got, we're a dual intensive university, the teaching and the research clearly incredibly important. And so what we want to do is weave the engagement through both of those very, very important things, so that for everybody working here and all our students, they can see how that external engagement, the enterprise, the entrepreneurship can be relevant for them, and also the employability. And we've had the placement scheme embedded here at Aston for many, many years, and it's been incredibly important for us. So there are things that actually strategically, for the way that we are and for our student outcomes, which are there, but you can't kind of take your eye off the ball. You have to realise that it's continually working with people to bring them on board with these areas.
Thanks, Paula. I'm conscious of time, so I think we are due to hand back to Emily around now, if my memory serves me correctly. So I'll do that now, and obviously we're happy to kind of pick up separately away from here.
Like that, I magically appear. Thank you so much, Sophie and Paula, for that wonderful sort of how-to in terms of the Outstanding Entrepreneurial University. I think they're going to be flooded with applications this year. It's going to be a really difficult, competitive year after that talk. I'm going to keep Paula with me here for now, because we're going to invite Alison onto the stage in a minute to talk about policy, one of the most popular sessions that we have at IEEC regularly. So watch as the audience come flooding in now, Alison and Paula. And I'm now going to hand over to Alison, who's going to put a few questions to Paula before taking it away with the policy session.
Thank you, Emily. Paula, we're delighted just to keep you on stage for a little bit longer, because we wanted to ask you about a report you've been involved with. So we really wanted just to grab hold of you and ask you about policy writing and report writing while we've got somebody who's maybe the face behind some of the reports that we see. So can we just ask you to share a little bit about the work you've been doing recently with the Small Business Charter?
Yes, thank you. I was part of a working group of Small Business Charter accredited business schools, looking at how we can build capacity amongst our staff for working with small businesses. And as with everything the Small Business Charter does, this was a collaborative process, and chaired by Sian Rees, actually at Cardiff Met. And we actually took about 9 months to a year, going around looking at how institutions were developing their staff and understanding what the picture was for the sector. Then the pandemic came along and things changed a little bit as we were sort of getting to the final part of the report. So we were able to amend our report and actually put in some of the things which were relevant for the new way of working, which we're all experiencing now. But IEEC has been very significant with the Small Business Charter in being part of the panels for accreditation for business schools. And so I think there's a really strong link there with what we did for the report and also with what I was talking about in the previous session to do with developing our staff skills, so that actually, if you're talking about embedding enterprise, entrepreneurship, working with small businesses, you can't just assume people have the skills. You have to build that. You have to build the culture. You have to enable people to shadow and do all sorts of things. Plus, you have to make it possible within the contracts. You have to make it serious within promotions criteria and all of these things alongside the other side of it, which is what do businesses need? And so marrying those two things together to help institutions build that capacity was what this report was all about.
Brilliant. So can I just ask, it says like Small Business Charter and there's a lot of talk about business schools, but I know colleagues in the audience are from all sorts of different backgrounds. Do you recommend that the recommendations speak to lots of people? Do you think we should all have a look at this report?
Absolutely. I think that's a very good point. And a way of illustrating within my team at Aston, I'm actually based within the business school, but Carolyn and team who are developing all our student entrepreneurs work right across 3 colleges. And because the demand is there, we know we want to be able to support entrepreneurship throughout the institution. And so these boundaries just don't work for universities. They certainly don't work for students. You're here on a course, you might have a business idea. You don't need to be within the business school to do that. So I think we do need that overall view. And that's the way I've always worked. And it's to do with connecting things together. I think sometimes as a sector, we find it difficult to connect things together as well. And you have to kind of continually think, oh, there might be something happening over there, which might be kind of a developing activity that is relevant. So I don't sort of go by business school boundaries, although the Small Business Charter do concentrate on the business school. They look definitely at that institution-wide context, which is very important.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, we were just really grateful just to grab you for this last bit, because it's always nice to put a face to some of the policy reports that we see, because I think sometimes we feel they're written by somebody else somewhere else. But I just wanted to finally ask you, you are telling us that this is written from the sector, this work that you've been involved with?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch it.
Sorry, no, it's a sector response. The work that you've been doing is very much like from the sector to the sector, because I think sometimes we feel policy comes from above.
I think you make a really good point there. Absolutely. This was colleagues actually working on this themselves, getting together, comparing how we're doing this and looking to see what our needs are jointly. And it's a really good way of working, because we know we're on the ground, we're working day to day with the students, with the entrepreneurs. We know what the needs are. And yes, it absolutely came from that level.
Brilliant. Well, Paula, I'll let you go, but thank you very much for bringing that real perspective to the report. And then I will start with my full policy overview. But thank you very much for your time and for extending your voice from Aston. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I'm going to set up my slides, and so there'll just be a small delay while I get myself organised, but I am going to be presenting to you my policy overview, which if you look in the programme, it will say that we are basically going to be reviewing the last 12 months and looking forward for the next. So as ever, always a challenge, but it's been the strain. Keen just to talk you through kind of our experience at sector level, and also maybe give you some documents that you might have missed, particularly when you've been working at home. So I would firstly really like to thank Paula for staying on. As you can see, I also stole that picture, but that's the report we were talking about, and there are a load of links that I'm going to do a whistle-stop tour through. So you might want to make sure your slide deck, rather than my lovely face and my ducks, are what you're looking at, because there'll be a few report from covers, but I promise you we'll give you the links. I can't personally do it while I'm talking, but you'll get all the links in the chat, and I think Kate will be there to help you with that. But I do just want to thank Paula very much for sharing how collaborative that report has been and how they've all worked together in order to achieve that. And as I said, bringing that kind of face of what enterprise and policy making actually looks like. I think we all expect these reports to tell us what to do, but really, as Paula says, it's an opportunity for us to get involved and to shape things. So I hope that we'll take that message forward as we go through the next year. But as you'll see, my role, as ever, is to focus on our policy and practice overview. So we'll be looking a little bit about our practice, because boy, did it change in the last 18 months, but also the policy that's been influencing us. So I will, if you don't already get this to your inbox personally every month, remind you that the EUK newsletter is really the place to be. It's where you'll find out what your colleagues are doing. You'll be able to share in their successes, see the impact that they're having. And also, as I'm going to highlight, there's a policy blog. So you'll find all sorts of things there. So in the links, you'll find, if you don't get it delivered directly to your inbox, that there is a newsletter that you can have as a member or as a non-member. So please make sure you sign up. From that, our website's always a good place to go. You'll remember last year we were really working hard to bring together everybody's viewpoints in terms of getting our ducks in a row for working at home and online. So there's still resource up there. There's still voice from students there. There's lessons on delivering top tips and hints from colleagues. There's all sorts of information. So don't forget that, and we will continue to update that as we kind of move into this beyond blended hybrid learning that we're now working through together. So I invite you to keep your eye on the website continually as we update and continue to change things. But really, what a year it's been. I think some of us feel a bit flattened by it. So talking about getting your ducks in a row, you might be a little bit squished, or you might just find there's been so many extra ducks that you kind of weren't expecting, that it's really hard to kind of start to think, right, how do I pull this together? There's a new academic year coming, and I know even at this stage, some of you are still not completely sure what's online, what's not online. And so there's still a lot of things to pull together. And I know this is one of the things that we're trying to address in these sort of, as we're having our chats at tables, like what are you doing about? And these are the essential questions that I know we want to try and resolve. So looking back over the last year, there's been a whole load of things that didn't happen, and a whole few things that did, and they both impacted us just as much. So in terms of things that didn't happen, we haven't had data sets, we haven't had surveys, we haven't had information that we were expecting, and the things that we've had have been slightly different. So for example, I've just had a message from Octopus, who did a university ranking for the last 2 years, who've just said that they're now going to pause and do it every 2 years instead of as an annual report. So that's just come in this morning. So things are shifting as people are working out what's appropriate, what does the last year's data show us. But boy, did we have a lot of things that did impact upon us, and we were so affected by those things. And I think really we haven't had a lot of time to take stock, and we've tried to adapt and address a lot of the things that have been coming our way, while still trying to deliver online and in a new hybrid working situation. So for many of us, I feel like it's been a year of educational hokey cokey. I don't really know how else to describe it. We've kind of had one foot in and one foot out, and we have to keep moving. So you really need to give yourselves a pat on the back. You've done a sterling job, and I know going ahead to the next year, there's still a lot of unknowns and a lot of things that we're unclear about, but we are a resilient bunch. So last year I asked you how you felt about things, and you were full of excitement to support your businesses, to support your graduates, and to really make a difference, and actually seeing enterprise as securing economic and social value for those that need it. You were really hopeful of maybe a new work-life balance, a new approach, but really your students are at the heart of kind of what matters. And actually you'll see that in the reports I'm going to highlight. Obviously there's a lot of issues coming through in terms of our students and preparing our students to cope with whatever we're calling the new normal, and however they're re-entering into educational life, having had a very disrupted couple of years. So I know we're good to go, but there's plenty of support out there, and there's lots of people who are monitoring things and supporting things. So we've got a lot of food for thought to share with you. So I'm going to start off with the Unlocking Opportunity report, something that you might want to look at in terms of a positive approach for seeing how to take things forward. But one thing that I wanted to pick up from the presentation that Mondoran started this morning is obviously something like the Race and Ethnic Disparities Report. For us, there's a whole load of important sections on that in terms of education, but also employment and enterprise. And I would refer you to the conversations that Aston have had where they've challenged some of these findings and challenged some of these thoughts. So reports are great, but try and find the counterpoint and see what the conversation about these responses are. So in terms of that, one of our underrepresented groups that we often talk about, and I think it was probably this time last year or the year before, I was talking to you about NatWest and the Rose Review. This time I'm picking up that Hyde have done a piece of work about an index, and if you've got me on full screen, you might be able to read your ranking in terms of your region and see where you're at, but you can take a look at that. You'll also have a look at the resilience and recovery report from our colleagues at Entrepreneurial, but they were supported this time by Barclays. So we're seeing that banks are getting into supporting these agendas and making some issues really count. And I think we're going to have to review our role in supporting that. They're recognising that the female entrepreneurs have been disproportionately impacted in terms of COVID, as have a lot of the disadvantaged groups. But what I'm going to say to you is that we need to hold these agencies to account. So I'm now mentioning HSBC in my roundup of all the banks. But basically, they have, in the recent report, come out and said they've got a model and they're going to work on things and support universities. And actually, we have a role in actually making these things fit for purpose and ensuring that their work is suiting us, is supporting us, and is right for our students. So we need to make sure that they deliver on these promises that go into reports. And so read these reports in order to hold them to their commitment. I'm also going to invite you to have a look at some support that's available to you. Nottingham University have, through a European project, made their EDI resource bank available. I invite you to contribute to it, as well as to search through it and look for different resources. And I'll thank John Pell for sharing that with me. But take a look at this kind of growing support within the community and across the sector. I also want to highlight the Sutton Trust work, which is the document on the side, but some of their highlighted work is about kind of the university for life and actually looking at skills. And I think that's something where really, as enterprise and entrepreneurship educators, we really come into this. It's saying that university students, and particularly disadvantaged students, are feeling excluded from these activities and aren't able to engage. And we have a huge role in the way that we structure our work, the times we put things on, where we put them on. We are potentially part of that systemic problem, and yet we're also part of the solution. So we are a route to giving these students enterprise experience, new skills that they didn't have, the confidence to prove that they can do these things. And so I really invite you to take a look at that report and see the kind of inspirational challenge it gives you. I also want to recommend us that we keep our eye on the major projects that have been funded in the last few years. So we've mentioned a couple of times Creative Spark, and I know they're with us at the conference and be able to answer questions, and you'll be able to hear from them again tomorrow. But also the knowledge exchange funding that's coming through. And again, as I said, you'll want these slides on large. A lot of our universities are working on projects there, and again, colleagues are here presenting on that. But you'll see in the corner, it says knowledge exchange, and this obviously is where I typically start talking to you about KEF, which has been our knowledge exchange framework. We were so hopeful that this would be our REF, TEF, KEF sweet spot. We were going to be able to really bring together our work on a par with learning and teaching and research within our university system. So this year saw the release of the KEF dashboard. If you haven't looked up your English institution, you should be able to find them and have a look. And as I said, the links will be coming through to you if they're not there yet. This is an interactive dashboard. You can take a couple of different institutions and compare them. I picked Aston because we've seen today already the amazing work that they're doing, the fantastic impact they're having on students. And you can see, basically in a kind of trivial pursuit way, those big bits of pie that they've earned by doing some great work, really achieving amazing things. And that's why we're here, and that's why they're Entrepreneurial University of the Year. So we're really excited that you can see this kind of in an interactive dashboard. Research England have presented this work, and there's a lot of information available in that. So really dig around and find your institution and have a look. However, we wanted to look at these 7 themes that they announced, and you'll see one of them is skills, enterprise and entrepreneurship. And we were really excited that this was going to be really powerful for us. if I can use Aston as an example, primarily because you've heard from the students today how fantastic, you've just heard from Paula, the range and the strategic level in which they're working, as well as the operational impact they're having. And you can see that come through in the narratives that they're also delivering. So we see a narrative from each of these institutions, and that for us as enterprise educators can be a really rich source of insight into how they're working. So the stats, the numbers, who they're working with, their policy, their strategic links. However, you'll recognise that some of those results that we had hoped for in terms of KEF have actually been dashed, and we have, as EUK, been very disappointed with the fact that, as you'll see, the smallest piece of pie for Aston, who, as we've seen, are Entrepreneurial University of the Year and have achieved the top 20%, if you can see that little ring, is the smallest piece of pie. And actually, to us, that doesn't reflect the achievements they've made in the sector, and that doesn't reflect the work that they're doing in terms of enterprise. So we have been lobbying to say that the skills, enterprise and entrepreneurship dashboard is kind of pulling too many things together and diluting the work that we're seeing coming through from our great enterprise centres and our enterprise educators. So by adding in things like learner days and CPD income, we have seen smaller pieces of pie in institutions that are in the top 20%. So this has been a disappointment. If you want to read all about it, it was in the blog, and you can access that through the links that are coming through, and just see how, while you can be really achieving in terms of one element, once you put things together, once you combine these lights on the dashboard, you're not getting the kind of green light that you maybe wanted to shine and show and amplify, particularly to senior management. So we explained all that. And I was today going to say to you that actually, whilst we're disappointed as a sector with the way these results have come through, actually the KEF Concordat is now where we're going to put our energy. These are our principles that are coming through, which will have a narrative and a kind of depth and strategic intent, and will show how organisations, how universities are working with their stakeholders and partners. However, I do have some more exciting news. Yesterday, we got the agenda for a KEF workshop that's happening next week, and both past and current EUK directors are in attendance on that, because they're reviewing they're reviewing the whole dashboard, but they're going to review that C perspective and the metrics within it in terms of, is it really showing enterprise skills effectively? Is it really showing entrepreneurship? Which is the point we've been making. So if you want to contribute, now is the time. You've got a very short window. Email us about this, because we really want to go in with your voice on this. So again, policy is happening now, and we need your help, because this for us is really where we had a chance to really show how those three things work together in terms of learning and teaching, in terms of research, and we feel that actually it's not showing the work that we're doing. So really keen for you to engage with us on that. But looking forward to the next 12 months. So this will always be the bit with a bit of a blip in it, with the data that was kind of a bit wrong, where we had business advisors who told business starts not to start. We had kind of the same, but kind of really quite different in terms of the way we've been working. And the metrics will show that. So something like KEF, where they roll together 3 years, it's going to distort the work that we've done, because I know many of you have said to students and graduates, I wouldn't start if I was you, or I'd pivot, or I'd shift, or actually your market's changed, so go back and start again. And I know that's been the right advice, but in terms of metrics, it will show a different result to what we've been expecting. But I am going to kind of excite you, hopefully, about the year ahead. We have got a huge opportunity, I think, to capture skill development. So in saying that, our students are shouting to us about their mental health, their concerns, their stresses, their strains, and also the difficulties they're having, and they feel that they haven't learned any skills. I think we, as enterprise educators, are in a massive position to reassure them that a year online and 18 months working at home, they have more skills than they know. They are resilient, they're adaptable, they're flexible, and this is really quite a powerful story for them to tell. So I would direct you to go back to something like EntreComp, where you can pick these things out and even use the threads, the 8 different levels, and really look to that to see how it all stacks together. I promised those of you that follow Twitter that we would give you a free gift, an early Christmas present from IEEC, which is a new guide for EntreComp. It's containing a simplified version that if you want to just get on board a new colleague, if you want to give somebody an overview, I know many of you are getting more and more familiar with it, but it might be a useful guide to share with others. So that is part of the Dropbox links that we're sharing with you, and that'll be something that we invite you to work on. There's also lots of different ways of actually capturing this. So you might be familiar with something like Yup, which again, I'll share in the links, which is a self-assessment tool. Drop me a note if you want to know more about self-assessment tools, or look in ECT Toolkit, where we're really grateful to colleagues who worked on a project to really share the different options that you have in terms of looking at how you can assess skills. Get your students' confidence back up. They have had a really rough time, but they have learned huge amounts. Make them know that they've achieved. I'm also going to shine a light on visas. There's lots of talk about where we are post-Brexit and whether we will have new visa rules with some of our new partner countries such as India. So watch this space if you're involved in visas for startups, because things will shift. We've been advised of that. I'm also going to ask you to think about your enabling environment. I think more than ever this year, we've looked at actually how we've been delivering our enterprise and entrepreneurship offer, and maybe reflecting that we've taken some of the systemic issues that are inherent within business that are alienating many of our underrepresented groups, disadvantaging people from starting up, and actually, in order to give our students authentic practice, we've merely brought all those inequalities into our education system. So we've offered morning breakfast meetings, we've given after hours sessions, we've done all the things that business does, and actually we've built in all those issues, we've created all those problems. So I think now is also a really good time as you're rebuilding your in-person offer or looking at what has worked online to actually decide to review your situational constraints and actually recognise that maybe where you've had less engagement, it's because people can't engage. So I'm reading a lot of stuff at the moment about how people are limited. There's an argument about there's no such thing as laziness, there's just barriers. And so I invite you to take a view and look at some of these things to see where it leads you. So although this is a policy tool, you'll see there a link to a better entrepreneurship policy tool, which actually, have a little look, gives you guidance notes. Now this is for developing policy, but it gives you checklists, it gives you ideas, it might give you and your colleagues something just to work through, some hints and tips in terms of what the issues you want to be looking at, to make sure that you're reviewing your constraints and recognizing that you're building a different, maybe hybrid solution that's more positive. So I'm going to invite you to take a look at that. Other projects, though, are happening. We are not getting too insular in terms of our post-Brexit life. We have got European projects we're involved with. If you can see the detail on the screen, you'll see a range of universities that are working on the HEI innovation capacity funded projects. And again, have a little look. The link is actually on that page. Have a little look and see and chat to those institutions today, find out what they're doing. I also invite you to keep your eye on the idea of being an Entrecomp champion. And good luck to colleagues who have bid for this, who I know are in attendance at the conference. This was out as a tender, and I know the decision is being made now in order to create a scheme called Entrecomp Champion. We at EUK would be so delighted to support this and continue our connection with Entrecomp through that. So we will be in touch as soon as we hear anything in order to encourage you to get your Entrecomp credibility by being an Entrecomp champion. So watch this space. Also invite you to look through, as ever, at ECT Toolkit. We've now started, at the request of Margarita herself, the author of Entrecomp, to look at how we look at the 3 missions in terms of Entrecomp. So we're going to really invite you to take a look at that and contribute if you wish to. But as I said, this is all really about getting your ducks in a row. So I'm going to ask you whether you can build your own ducks. So as I said, my role now is really looking at policy and practice. And so I have to thank Safia because I totally stole her idea. But can you mentally build yourself a duck? So I have, as you've probably gathered, been desperately trying to get my ducks in a row while I've been talking to you. And actually hope that you can take those pieces and mentally creatively put them together. So it's not just about creative thinking, it's about creative doing. Now this would be something as a kind of icebreaker or a start of an activity that I would have thought I would have to do with pieces of Lego in a room. But Safi has proved to me that you can do it online and with your students. So I'm going to ask you, if you've got chat open and you mentally put those pieces together, is any of your ducks there? Can you see a duck with your number on? And if so, you can share it in the chat and let's see how creative we are still feeling at the end of a policy half an hour. Sorry, I've started to get my cough back. But get your ducks in a row because there's lots and lots of things to think about. So please put in your chat, are you a 20? Are you a I think I was a 4, but I actually ended up with some bits left over, which is no bad thing either. So I'm going to invite you to think about taking your practice online, taking your practice to what is equitable, what is fair, what is accessible, and making this change for your students this year. This is really a huge opportunity to review your blended approach and take it into what we've called an Ed Online beyond blended. So if you've had your little chance to see if your ducks here, or maybe you haven't, then I'm just going to say EUK will support you while you get your ducks in a row. If there is anything that we can do, please get in touch with us and build your pieces. Good luck for the next academic year. And as I said, if you have any thoughts on metrics, please keep in touch with us, because this is really important for all of us. As Paula has shown, policy comes from the sector, so we really need to hear your voice. So I'm going to give you back to Emily and say thank you very much, but do please keep connected, and good luck with next term.